Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me for the 20th episode in the Conversation with Alan series tonight. I'm Alan Locher. I created this series to have open and honest discussions about the rise of hate and the rise of anti-Semitism, with high hopes that it leads to conversations that make us all think about our own place in history and what we can do together to change our country's course to stop hate in every form. Tonight, I am truly honored to welcome Dov Forman, who is here to share the story of his great-grandmother, Lily Ebert, who on Yom Kippur, 1944, while fighting to stay alive as a prisoner in Auschwitz, made a promise to herself. She would survive the hell she was in and tell the world her story for everyone who couldn't. At the age of 16 in 2020, when he was separated from his great-grandmother during the COVID pandemic, Dov became determined to record her story for posterity. He introduced the world to his great-grandmother on TikTok, and now they have over 2 million followers, and he received the Points of Light Award for the services to Holocaust education. Together, he and Lily bridge the generation gap and share her experiences during the war in the international best-selling book, Lily's Promise, Holding On to Hope Through Auschwitz and Beyond, a story for all generations, an unforgettable tale of resilience and resistance. Dov knows that it is up to younger people like him to keep Lily's promise. He and Lily bridge the generation gap to share her experience, reminding us of the joy that accompanies the solemn responsibility of keeping the past and our stories alive. In recent months, Dov has marched with over 9,000 folks from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and for the first time visited Budapest and his great-grandmother's hometown of Bonhad, Hungary. At a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise, I am in awe of this young man and what he's been able to do to remind the world about the importance of Holocaust education. It is my pleasure to welcome Dov Forman to Conversations with Alan. Hey, Dov.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. It means a lot.
Well, it really means a lot that you're here. You know, as a child of two Holocaust survivors myself who are no longer alive, to use their voice, I thank you on their behalf for what you are doing to keep all the survivor stories alive.
Thank you. No, it's an honor to join you, and I know it's been quite a back and forth trying to organise a date, but I'm happy to be here today to share this important story. And as you say, as anti-Semitism, hatred of all kinds is on a rise across the world, it's so important that we learn the lessons of the past and use them to build a better future together.
Amen. We do have so much to talk about, but first, how is Lily? I know she had a fall in July and broke her hip. How's she doing?
Yes, so as you say, she broke her hip, and any surgery at 99 years old is, of course, incredibly serious. Not least the hip operation under general anaesthetic in the hospital at 99. And thank God she is a fighter, and I know that she was fighting to survive with a full recovery, and she's now home after, I think, spending a few weeks in hospital. And it's great to see her at home, surrounded by family, surrounded by those who love her. Of course, she had hundreds of visitors in the hospital and at home too, but to have her home in the place where she feels most safe and most comfortable is really special. And we are hoping that she'll make a full recovery very soon. We know and we trust that she will do, because she has that fight. She wants to get better. She wants to carry on because she feels she has so much more to achieve.
And boy, has she achieved. You know, every Friday, I love seeing your posts. You celebrate Shabbat at home with her. How long has that tradition been going on?
So this story and that tradition really starts all about 3 years ago during the COVID pandemic, when I began to use social media to share my great grandmother's Holocaust testimony, but not only my great grandmother's testimony, the story of all the Jewish people, whether it be through the Holocaust, through Jewish traditions, through Shabbat, and also my own story as a great grandson of a Holocaust survivor, being Jewish in the United Kingdom, where unfortunately there is anti Semitism. And so I've used social media over the past 3 years now to share that story. We've had over 1 billion views, 2.1 million followers, and the numbers are incredible. But besides the numbers, the impact, I think, is what I care more about, because You can reach millions of people and have 1 billion views, but what impact does that have if you're not using that to educate, if you're not using it to make a positive difference in the world? And I really am a firm believer that whilst there are many dangers to social media, we need to use it and focus on the positives and the way that we can educate and the way that we can make a change with our simple voice or with a click of one button that says post. And I think all children should not be discouraged from using social media, but rather should be encouraged to use social media in a positive and safe way. But back to the initial question of where those Shabbat Shalom videos started. So it was sort of towards February 2021 when I moved from Twitter more to TikTok, and within 3 months we had 1 million views. And I was thinking, well, what's the best way not only to share my great grandmother's Holocaust testimony, but also to engage on a personal level with our followers? And we decided that we were going to show before every Jewish festival, but also before every single Shabbat, a Shabbat Shalom video or a video welcoming in the festival. And so every Shabbat, hopefully nearly without fail, I can say, we've posted a Shabbat Shalom video for the past 2 years at least. And it's amazing to see the response that we get from Jews all over the world in hundreds, or maybe not hundreds, but in tens of countries, and also from non-Jews too. And it's really special, the fact that so many non-Jewish people have learned the phrase Shabbat Shalom from our videos and comment it and reply. And sometimes when we don't do it in the right kind of timing that we do it every other week, people are saying Shabbat Shalom, hope you're putting a Shabbat Shalom video out this week. So it's really nice, and it's really special to see the response that we get back.
Well, and I think also for you, having that time with her has just got to, it will live on with you for so many years after.
No, I'm glad that we've had so much time spent together over the past few years, and hopefully we'll have many more years of that too. I mean, she's 99. These are the last moments to learn from the survivors. And that's why I do what I do with such urgency. People sometimes say, why do you push it so much on social media? Why do you carry on sharing the same things? And I say, because in 3-4 years' time, who knows the exact time frame, but there won't be any survivors left, and we won't be able to capture these stories anymore. So for me, it's so important that whilst my great-grandmother and other survivors, especially in the United Kingdom, are still alive, I will use my platform and provide them a platform for their voice to be heard.
Well, I am grateful, and keep doing what you're doing. Can you remind people watching how the Holocaust started with the use of words?
So the Holocaust started, really, I guess it depends on how you define, and I mean, it's a great historical debate. But one thing I will say, rather than focusing on the exact timeline, because that could take a whole hour, but what I will rather say is that we have to be careful with our words. And people often think, those especially who have not learned that much about the Holocaust, they wonder, how can something like Auschwitz-Birkenau just be created overnight? How can they create a killing factory that was used to kill over 1.1 million people during the Holocaust? And you wonder to yourself, even as a Jewish person who has heard about the Holocaust your whole life, how did that happen? And you come to realize that Auschwitz and the gas chambers, they're not places which fell from the sky. They didn't come overnight. This is something which was built up over years, tens of years, because of language, dangerous language, hatred, simple anti-Semitic tropes, caricatures against the Jewish people. And that's what allowed ordinary people to become bystanders during the Holocaust. And not only bystanders, but perpetrators too. Because we often refer to these people as monsters, but we have to realize they're not monsters, they're humans. And I think the reason why we do refer to them as monsters is because we want to detach ourselves from them and say, well, I could never do anything like this. I'm not a monster, I'm just a human. But they were monsters, they weren't humans. But no, they were humans. And actually, we can get to a point where we allow hatred to go unchecked in society, where we don't stand up for others, when language is just so easily passed around. And we do see that on social media now, unchecked, unchallenged. And the social media companies, they really do have to answer for that. We have to ensure that we create a society where people are reporting things and want to stand up for others, but also that when those reports are put in, that they are taken seriously. And so the social media companies, but also individuals, have to realize that most of us, of course, will never become, and I hope are not on the path to becoming, active perpetrators of mass genocide. But we could easily become active bystanders to one. And we've seen countless genocides happening since the Holocaust. So it's not easy for us to say, no, it can't happen again, because it can. And so the phrase never again is an important one, but when just used as a phrase never again and not actioned upon, I think it's actually quite dangerous. And we have to realize that our actions and our words are very important, and we have to take care of them, but others too. We have to stand up wherever we see hatred and injustice in the world, especially when it's going unchecked. We have to stand up in the first instance, because that's when we can make a change. That's when we can make a difference.
Couldn't say that better. For those who don't know your grandmother's story, can you share what happened to her and to her Hungarian-born family?
Sure. So my great-grandmother's story of survival from the Holocaust is not the typical story of the Holocaust, but especially not of the Hungarian Holocaust. The Hungarian Holocaust took place over around 3-4 months, from March 1944 until July. And in that space, over 450,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And my great-grandmother was born in 1923, which makes her, in the time of filming in August 2023, almost 100 years old. She was the eldest of 6 siblings and was born and grew up in a small suburban Hungarian town called Bonyard. And she often describes her childhood as a very happy, protected childhood, where she spent a lot of her time outside with cousins. She had hundreds of members of her extended family living in the same town. And unfortunately, everything changed in March 1944 when the Nazis invaded Hungary. And her neighbors, who they had previously got on very well with, suddenly were not there to protect them. And the government, who had previously not persecuted the Jews, I mean, there were laws against the Jews, but they weren't sending them to death camps, had suddenly turned and worked with the Nazis to round up the Jews, especially in her town. And the over 1,000 Jews in her town, which was a very small town of about 10,000 population, so the Jewish population was quite big there, were rounded up on the 9th of July 1944, after a 5-day journey in the grueling heat, arrived in a place where they did not know where they arrived, but eventually they found out that they had arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And within a few hours of arrival, my great-grandmother's mother, youngest sister, and youngest brother were murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau. My great-grandmother and 2 of her other sisters were sent to work in the camp. Her other brother wasn't taken to the camp. He was taken to slave labor in Hungary, and her father luckily died before. But she was taken to work. She was working for 4 months in Auschwitz-Birkenau in the seamstress, and then she was taken to a munitions factory in Germany, in Altenburg, and she was there for again another 4 or 5 months before being taken on the Death March in April 1945, where they marched for 5 days without food, without water, without shoes, and I think without many clothes either. And then eventually they were liberated by the Americans. And my great-grandmother kind of describes that moment in our book and to me on our TikTok videos as a surreal moment. But that's really the moment when they woke up to the traumas and the pain that they had been exposed to.
Wow. What is your earliest memory of hearing this story? And you call her Savta?
Yes. So we call her Savta, which is grandmother for Hebrew. And my earliest memory, it's a very hard question, because I guess as a child, you don't think about these things. You just are aware of them, and you don't realize when the first time you became aware of them was. But I remember one moment, which I speak about in the book, I think in the first chapter, which sticks out in my mind as the moment when everything sort of changed for me. And that was the first time I ever saw my great-grandmother's Auschwitz tattoo on her left arm, A10572, a permanent reminder of the Nazis' crimes against humanity and what was the evil that she went through in those years. And it was on a Friday night. My great-grandmother doesn't like talking about the Holocaust on Shabbat, because she feels that Shabbat is a time to be together with the family and celebrate, really, as a Jewish family, one which was rebuilt after such pain of the Holocaust. And my friend, who was a year older than me, came round. I think I was in year 5, which is, I think, grade 6 in America, or grade 4. I'm not sure how that works. But I think I was around 10, 11 years old. And my friend, who was a year older than me, said, "I've just been learning about the Holocaust. Savta," who he also calls her Savta, all my friends call her Savta, "can I see your Auschwitz tattoo?" And I remember her slowly lifting up her left sleeve and reading out her number, A10572. And I will never forget that moment. That really sticks in my mind. And I think from then on, that was when I really realized the pain and the crime and the tragedy that she had been through at such a young age, only a year older than I am now. I'm 19, she was 20, and she's now 99. So you can imagine those memories which she holds with her and that pain that she saw. And I remember when we were writing the book, interviewing her, there were so many stories which she was telling us, which are even too graphic to go in the book, and they're not in the book, because the things that she saw there, the hell that she went through, it's so painful not only to hear, but even more so for her to tell. And every single day she has to relive those horrors, whether it's through telling us on TikTok, and we thank her so much for that, because the gift that she's given the world through those videos, it's so important, and I don't think she ever will realize the impact that she's had through that. But even just the lessons that we can learn from it on a human and personal level, whether or not it's just with a focus on the Holocaust, but just on lessons for humanity, I think are also so important. And if we forget the past, we are doomed to repeat it. And that's why it's so important. And so many people kind of always ask me, why do you educate on TikTok? And it's for that reason. I mean, one of the reasons is because hatred is rising in the world. Another reason is because these are the last moments to hear from the survivors. But another is because really, if we forget, if we don't use every method possible, then we won't be able to build a better future. And we will come around and we'll say, well, why didn't we use TikTok? Why didn't we try and reach the young children? And whilst it's not the best medium, there is a lot of hatred, and there is anti-Semitism, and there is distortion and denial on the app. We have to be on there, because if we're not on there, people are educating, then those people who are spreading denial, who are spreading hatred, who are spreading distortion, they will get to the young children who are 10, 15 years old quicker than we will. And then those people won't understand. They'll say to you, no, the Holocaust didn't happen. I saw it on TikTok. It's fake. And so that's why it's so important that we're there too, the people who are educating.
It's incredible. I can't imagine you at such a young age hearing, those brutal stories, but also, it is incredible. And, I will continue to say it, grateful to you to realize the impact of these stories and how important it is to share it. I mean, you and I are witnessing what is happening in the Ukraine, unfold before our eyes. And for me, it's felt like a firsthand view of what my mother and father sort of lived through, because, there were no visuals, really video visuals like there are of this. What is that like for you to sort of see it in this century and this time period while you're telling this story?
So I do think with comparisons, of course, we have to be very careful. I think every tragedy and every war is unique in its own way. And I think we have to be very clear in saying the Holocaust is the worst tragedy, in my opinion, in human history. And its shadows are still covering the shadows from the gas chambers of, and not just the shadows, but the pillars of smoke from the gas chambers of Auschwitz now still cover all of Europe today.
Sorry, Dov, I hear you clicking your pen. Sorry.
I was actually privileged to visit Ukraine in 2019, just a few years before the war, and see how much of a beautiful country it is. And I actually went to visit a Jewish orphanage in Odessa, and the incredible work they do there, saving Jewish children from families in which they have various problems. And it really, that memory stays with me forever. I was there over Shabbat, and being with those children, spending that time with them without social media, without the outside world, and just hearing their stories was really special. And we must not shy away from telling the world how terrible the situation is, and people raging war and killing people for no reason, especially as Jewish people. Those fundamentally goes against our values, and we must always call that out. But again, as I say, the Holocaust was a unique and tragic incident in history, one which we must always stay away from comparisons. But it is important to say, because of the lessons we learned in the Holocaust, we must stand up today, and we must realize that other things similar can happen too. And if we stay silent, if we don't use our voices, if we don't learn from the past, if we realize that during the Holocaust, if other people would have opened up their homes like so many did to the Ukrainian refugees, perhaps the outcome would have been different. And in that way, we can learn. In that way, we can say, well, maybe we need to use the lessons that we learned from the Holocaust to implement that today in places like Ukraine. And I think the world has learned. I think the response to the tragedy and to the war in Ukraine today, the unprovoked war by Putin on an innocent, I guess, country at the moment, for no reason, we have, I think, learned the lessons. And I think so many hundreds of thousands of people in the United Kingdom opened up their homes to Ukrainian refugees, millions of Ukrainian refugees across Europe. Of course, I don't know the figures in America, and I assume it's less because they would have had to travel so far. But nonetheless, I think the world has shown itself that when we do stand up and when we do intervene, we can support each other. And you just have to look at the response to Ukraine, the countless countries sending weapons and soldiers and tanks, and you realize, well, what could have happened in the Holocaust if other countries stood up, and other countries who did know, they really did know what was going on, but they stayed silent. And I guess that's where you can see that possibly the world has learned.
Hmm. You said in an interview that Holocaust education was ingrained in you from an early age at Jewish primary school. And at the time, there were many more survivors still alive. And every week you would have somebody sharing their story. I'm curious, is there another story, from school that stuck with you?
So I'm very lucky and unique in my position that I went to a Jewish primary school, and many of my friends, I wouldn't say that they're lucky or we're lucky, but are descendants from Holocaust survivors, and that's the story of most Jewish people, especially in Europe, and also in America, because we're all refugees, we're all immigrants from the time of the Holocaust to other pogroms. The reason we're here is because of hatred and persecution, and I guess it's the story of the whole Jewish people. And what people don't realize is that the Holocaust didn't end in 1945. That trauma and those stories have been passed down to the children, the grandchildren, the great grandchildren, and even it lives in the survivors too. And you can see the effects on the families. And I've seen that across so many of my friends, whether that be through food or through security measures, whatever it is. But you can see the effects it's had on survivors and their families. And I'm unique in my position that there were countless Holocaust survivors who I'm still close with now and who are still alive, but unfortunately others who have also passed away, who I used to be able to hear in school. And I've built incredible relationships with some of them. There are so many incredible survivors, which I'm so honored to know and to be able to sit aside in different events from the United Kingdom. And I won't list names now, but just so many of them who have incredible stories. And there are so many of those stories which stick out in my head. And I guess I am a religious Jew. I wear my kippah, and I'm proud to say that I'm religious. And one of the reasons I'm religious is because you see the strength that those survivors have, even after the hell that they've been through. And there are survivors, and rightly so, and it's justified, who aren't religious and who decide not to believe in God. But my great grandmother and so many other survivors that I've met do believe in God, and they are religious. And if they can have that strength, and if they wanted to rebuild, then I should have too, because they really see the beauty in life. And they always are so positive. My great grandmother always has a smile on her face, and it's really amazing to see. And I take that strength and I take that positivity and I try and implement it as much as possible into my own life.
I can see it. I can see it in your great grandmother's face every time, and every time you put out a video, the passion you have for this subject and this story is incredible. Can you talk about the quote from Nobel laureate and Auschwitz survivor Elie Wiesel, "When you listen to a witness, you could become a witness"? The impact that quote had on you personally?
Yes. So I use this quote often, which I'm assuming maybe is why you reference it. I often like to share it, especially on my Instagram, more than on TikTok. But even so, I think it's one which is so important. And I try, especially for my non-Jewish followers, because that's the predominant, especially on TikTok, but again on Instagram too. The majority of our followers are not Jewish. And I'm incredibly proud of that fact, because the Jewish people live this story. We are descendants of the survivors. We know the effects. We understand. There's still so much to be learnt. And I completely believe that all Jewish people should learn, all Jewish people should read books about the Holocaust, because we can't be naive. We can't think we know enough. There's always more to learn. There's always more lessons to learn and to put into our own lives. And we can't say we've learned enough, we're good enough. But especially for non-Jewish people, I want them to realize that as we approach almost 80 years now since the end of the Holocaust, and as the numbers of survivors dwindles, it increasingly becomes our responsibility to take the stories of the Holocaust and to pass them on to further generations. Because unfortunately, my children will probably never be able, I don't have children yet, but when I do, will never be able to meet or hear directly from a Holocaust survivor. And of course, there are new methods of technology such as VR, and you'll be able to speak to survivors. I know projects which are going on at the moment trying to get that ready, to be able to virtually speak to a hologram, but it's not the same as meeting a survivor face to face, and it's not the same as becoming a direct witness. And Elie Wiesel, an Auschwitz survivor, Nobel laureate, says, when you listen to a witness, you become a witness. And I want every single person to realize that no matter, even if they only hear 30 seconds from a survivor, even if they only meet them and say hello, shake their hands, whatever it is, you then become that person's witness. You've met a person who was an eyewitness, who saw what went on in the depths, whether it be of Auschwitz-Birkenau or other camps in the Holocaust, or when they were in hiding, whatever their story is. When you listen to a witness, or when you even meet a witness, you become a witness. You become a torchbearer to their story. And what that means is that they've taken their torch, the torch that they lit so many years ago when they began educating, talking, or even if they didn't talk about their story, but just being who they were, they lit that torch. And it's up to you to take your torch that they then passed on to you, that they then lit, and pass that on to every single person you meet, to light their own torches, to realize that it's your responsibility to share their voice, to even if it's just their name, to share that as far as possible, because that's the way that you'll make a difference. That's the way. Because when you hear the number 6 million, when you read a textbook and you see that 6 million people were murdered in the Holocaust, it's incredibly hard to understand. How do you fathom 6 million? 6 million people, 1.1 million people murdered in Auschwitz-Birkenau. How can you understand that? The vastness, the scale of the operation, it's impossible. And I mean, you can understand that 6 million people were murdered, but what does that actually mean? But when you start to hear one person's story, when you realize that Lily Ebert lost her mother, her youngest sister, her youngest brother in the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then she survived and built a family of 3 children, 10 grandchildren, 37 great-grandchildren as of last week, that's incredibly special. And you realize that imagine if every single one of those 6 million could have had 37 great grandchildren. Imagine the lives that they would have built. People like me who have hope and dreams ahead of myself, who were murdered for no reason other than the fact that they were born Jewish. That's the way. Or when you go to Auschwitz-Birkenau and you see the pile of shoes, and I think it's block 5 in the museum part there, you see that great big pile of shoes or hair, and you realize that those shoes could have been the shoes that my great uncle could have walked in on the way to the gas chamber. I think that's when it starts to put it in perspective. That's when you can start to understand. And it's for that reason that I try and spread that quote as much as possible. You have to become a witness to a personal story. That's the way that you can understand. That's the way that you can feel the pain. And you'll never be able to understand. I try so hard, but you'll never be able to comprehend what went on, how they survived, what they saw. But you can try at least. And the only way to do that is by listening to a personal story. And that's why I try and share that quote as much as possible, because it's all about the witness. It's all about the testimony.
Incredible, Dov. Lily's Promise, Holding On to Hope Through Auschwitz and Beyond, a story for all generations. It was so powerful, so incredibly moving. What prompted you to write the book?
So firstly, I would like to say thank you to you and to anyone else who's read the book. We are overwhelmed constantly and consistently by the messages we get, the positive response to the book. Thankfully, the book was a New York Times bestseller for 3 weeks in a row. And we're incredibly proud of the impact it's had on the world. It's in over 15 languages, especially in some languages where they don't really talk about the Holocaust that much. And I'm proud of that. Hopefully in a year's time, I think, or shortly, it's coming out in Chinese too. And it's in places like that where I'm proud that the book is coming out in places where at times you might feel that they haven't really learned about the Holocaust.
You should be very proud, because it is it is so important that you shared it, and it's as a Jewish person and yourself, to see the response is fantastic. But yeah, so tell me.
The book came about because I felt that whilst it was important to have my great-grandmother's story documented on social media, people wanted to learn more. They kept asking me, tell us more about her story. What about this detail? What about that detail? And it's possible to get everything across on social media. And I also extremely value the importance of traditional forms of telling stories, of storytelling. And the best way to do that is through a book. And so we worked with various historians, and we decided that we would do it in the first person, where I asked my great-grandmother questions, recorded her answers, transcribed those answers, fact-checked everything with Holocaust survivors, and then there's a few chapters from myself in my voice, but the majority of the story is in my great-grandmother's own voice, with her own words, in exactly how she wanted to tell it. And I think what's unique about the book is the fact that it's a great-grandmother, great-grandson bond, but also that my great-grandmother was 20 years old during the Holocaust. She remembers every single detail, so I think the level of detail in Lily's Promise is also quite high. And I also think it's written in a way that's accessible. It's an easy read, in my biased opinion. I think you can pick it up and finish it within a day or two, or over a weekend. And that's what we wanted. We wanted people to be able to read it and easily get through this book, but pick up a lot of information and stories along the way that will help them learn valuable lessons throughout their life. And I hope that that's what we achieved through Lily's Promise. But the reason we wanted to write it again was similar to the same reason we wanted to set up the social media, was that these are the last moments. If we didn't do it then, my great-grandmother was 96, 97 at the time of writing. Who knows how long at the time she was going to live? I mean, thankfully she's now 99, nearly 100, but who knows how long she and other survivors have left. And I didn't want to leave it too late. I've spoken to countless other Jewish individuals, but also non-Jewish people who are descended from Holocaust survivors, and they all say to me one thing, that they regret not having asked enough questions. They regret not having recorded the stories enough. And I didn't want to have that regret. I wanted to ensure that I had done all I could to record that story and to get down as much as possible that I can from her, because everything she says is so valuable.
My sister and I were able to get my parents to sit down for the Shoah Foundation, which was a big deal for us. But I still wish I had done a lot of what you did to get more of it, because there's so much I still don't know. I know a lot, and I'm very close to, you and I would not be sitting here if not for the family who risked their lives for my mother and father. So, I realize how blessed I am in that respect. You talk about Savta will turn 100 years young in December. Can you, put into words some of the biggest lessons you've learned from her?
Sure. So I really think I could sit here all day recounting and telling you the stories that not the stories, the lessons even that I've learned from her. And I will try and share a few of them. The first one that comes to mind is appreciate even the smallest things in life. The smile that I see on her face, even when you tell her something small or give her something, a thank you that she gives to you. It really, and it's a real emotional, and it's one that she actually means. And if she ever felt that she would ever even have hurt you by mistake or said something, she will always apologize in the greatest way possible. And that humility in doing that. And I think those are extremely important lessons. One, of course, is also family, the importance of family and seeing family as often and as much as possible and staying in contact, whether you live on opposite sides of the world, whether you're on travels, whatever it is, but appreciating that you still have family and that you can be in contact with them, and that no matter how, also another lesson is no matter how bad things are, things will get better. My great grandmother always speaks about the light at the end of the tunnel and seeing that light at the end of the tunnel. And no matter how far you are from that light, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will get there one day, and things will get better. And there are also people there to support you. You just have to go out and find them. One other lesson I think is also that giving is receiving in life. You don't always need to take from others. Giving is also taking, and you should take gratitude from that in life, and you should try and give as much as possible. And again, there's so many other things, but one thing which I think I'll end on in terms of the lessons is tolerance and respect for others, but also standing up for others. That's something which my great grandmother so often says, that the gas chambers and Auschwitz-Birkenau didn't begin with the gas chambers. It didn't begin with killing. It began with words, and we have to be incredibly careful with our words, as I said at the beginning. But we also have to say that wherever we see dangerous words, wherever we see hatred, we have to stand up for others. We have to stand up against it and say this is not acceptable. And no matter how different someone is to you, they are only different. It doesn't mean they're better. It doesn't mean they're worse. They're just different. And life would be incredibly boring if we weren't different, if we were all the same. So we have to appreciate those differences.
Absolutely. You mentioned it's so important to learn about the Holocaust and read books. Besides Lily's Promise, is there a book that you would recommend to anybody watching today, myself included?
There are so many books about the Holocaust. I wouldn't want to offend anyone. Maybe it's hard. I think all of Elie Wiesel's books are incredible. Night, I think Viktor Frankl's books. There are so many, but I think those, like the fundamentals, are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak more about different survivors' memoirs, but I wouldn't want to leave out.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. King Charles wrote the foreword of the book, and you were invited to Buckingham Palace around Holocaust Remembrance Day last year. How did he come to write the foreword, and what was it like bringing Lily to Buckingham Palace?
We are incredibly honoured by the support that we've had from the monarch, His Majesty King Charles III, and also that the survivors received from his mother to Queen Elizabeth II, who was incredibly supportive of the survivor community, who hosted my great-grandmother on a number of occasions for tea in Buckingham Palace. And actually, we've met His Majesty now a few times, I think on 3 separate occasions, twice since he's been king. And he really shows so much love to the survivors, but incredibly to even more so, I think, to my great-grandmother. As you say, he wrote the foreword to our book, Lily's Promise, which you can see behind me, just over there. And that's the original one, which is signed by him. And yeah, we were incredibly honoured to have him. And I remember when I told my great grandmother that I'm going to reach out to His Majesty. Well, he wasn't His Majesty at the time, but to Prince Charles, who at the time was the Prince of Wales, to ask him if he would consider writing just a short quote for our book and why it's important to learn about the Holocaust. So I sent them an email, and we had various meetings backwards and forwards with the palace and his team, including himself, discussing what we might be able to do. And at the end, they turned around to me and said he can't write a quote. So we thought, oh no. And they turned around and said instead he would like to write the foreword. And so that was just a moment when you kind of think, am I dreaming? Is this real? To have the Prince of Wales at the time, who we knew was going to become the king in future years, write the forwards. That means so much to us, and we are eternally grateful to him, and the support again that he's given to the Jewish community and the survivor community. We really appreciate it so much, and we tell him that every single time. And this was actually in Windsor Castle. My great grandmother received her MBE, which is one of the highest awards that you can receive.
Hold on.
So
I think is this from that time?
No, so that's in Buckingham Palace.
Okay.
But yeah, on a separate occasion, that was when he was still the Prince of Wales. This one was when His Majesty the King, the photo I just showed you. But even so, we are so grateful for the support we received. And going there to the palace, both palaces we've been to, Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace, again, you feel like you're dreaming. You don't think it's real. You go there, you see the guard. You go inside, and there's a lot of formality surrounding it. But one thing is for sure, he's an incredibly kind man who actually cares about the stories of the Holocaust. He wants people to learn from history, and he actually engages. And when you speak to him, you can see that he cares. I've met so many celebrities, politicians, important individuals, state leaders from many different countries over the past 3 years. And the king is up in the top in someone who actually cares, wants to listen, and asks you questions about how he can help. And that's something which we really value as a community.
Correct. We need people to participate in spreading this message.
If I may,
your great grandma. Oh yeah, go ahead.
If I may, I would also say that having the royal family and the king, someone who really is so important and influential, say that the lessons of the Holocaust must be learned, and that it must never be forgotten, and that we will never let something like that happen again, really reassure the Jewish community, I think, across the world, that actually if there was hatred on an unprecedented scale like that during the Holocaust again, he would hopefully step in and say, no, I've met Holocaust survivors. I know that we need to learn the lessons from the past. These are the lessons that we should learn, and this is not acceptable. And so I hope that through the work that we've done for countless other survivors too, I hope that he would turn around if there ever was incredible hatred against the Jewish people again and be on our side. And I think that's incredibly reassuring.
Completely agree, 100%. You know, your grandmother made her promise in 1944, but the trauma sort of stayed buried for decades. And I think it was after your great grandfather's death that she decided to turn the pain into purpose. Can you talk a little about that?
Yes. So as you say, I think that pain and trauma, as with so many Holocaust survivors, stayed locked up away in the back of their minds. And of course, they still thought about it. And of course, it still affected them every single day. But actually sharing that story, they didn't really until, I think, across the world, the 1970s, 80s, or after the Eichmann trial. And that's when really people started talking about it again. And in my great grandmother's case, only in the 1980s, once she had already moved to London and after her husband passed away, did she start telling her story. I think the first time she went to speak to some teachers and then in school, and then she would go out to universities. It's, I think that really on a national scale, on an international scale even, her promise hadn't been fulfilled, in my opinion, until the lockdown, which is when we wrote the book and we started sharing her story on social media. I mean, she had always been fulfilling that promise and telling her story on a smaller scale to schools, universities, teachers, but she's now been able to educate hundreds of millions, I mean, over 1 billion people across the world. And that is definitely the fulfillment of her promise that she made herself in Auschwitz-Birkenau, that if she survived, she would tell the world. And she's definitely fulfilled that promise in a way that I don't think anyone would have ever thought that would have been possible. And she often turns around and says, the Nazis did not win. I'm standing here today. I'm able to tell my story. There's not one of them still around. Or, well, there are a few Nazis who managed to escape and who are still alive. Some of them, of course, are in trials, but some of them just were able to live a happy life after. And that's not justified and that shouldn't have happened. But besides that, my great-grandmother turns around and says, the Nazis are not here on the whole. I am. I have grandchildren. I have great-grandchildren. They don't. But not only that,
37.
37, exactly. And I'm able to share my story, is what she says. And she really has fulfilled that promise on an unbelievable scale.
Certainly. She certainly did win. You contacted a journalist during the pandemic, the Jewish News. What prompted you to reach out?
So really, that's what started this whole journey. Before I even started posting on social media, before I even went viral for the first time on Twitter and then on TikTok, or even started writing the book, the first thing I did during the pandemic, when I was incredibly bored at home, was realize that I would contact a journalist at the Jewish News and speak about how my great grandmother has adapted to using Zoom and educating via Zoom to schools. I mean, I organized for her to speak in my school, and I saw how quickly she learns about Zoom and how quick she was to jump to say, I want to do this online, and I'd be happy to share that way. And I saw so many other Holocaust survivors doing that too. So I contacted journalist Jack Mendel, who now no longer works at the Jewish News, but I contacted him and said, I think we could write an article together about how survivors have adapted to using social media during the lockdown. And that's when this all started for me, really, because I wrote this article together with him, and that did quite well inside the Jewish community. And I realized that I have a voice. Again, as well, when the first tweet went viral on Twitter, I realized that with one click of a blue button that said tweet, or now X, you can make an impact on the world and use your voice for a positive thing rather than all the hatred that we see on social media. And I have realized, and I would encourage every single other young person to use your voice on social media, especially for good, because there is so much hatred. But when you stand up and when you use it for good, that's the greatest way to fight against it. You often will do no help in kind of fighting with these people, the haters online. But actually, when you just spread positivity and when you spread the truth, that's when you can make a difference.
Well, that's the power of you clicking that button had so many effects over these last 3 years since the pandemic. Talk about the German banknote that she received from a liberator, a Jewish American soldier who wrote 10 words of hope.
Yeah.
Tell us what those words are, and then how you put that out on social media.
So I often, by the way, think to myself, what would have happened if I didn't put this out on social media 3 years ago? My life has changed so much, and so many opportunities have been afforded to me and my great grandmother. Incredible opportunities and so many miracle findings and so many connections that we've made in the book, and meeting people like His Majesty the King.
I'd like to say it again, miracle findings, because it really is.
Exactly, and I'll get onto the miracle finding, and so much has happened since, and I guess you have to realize that you never know what's coming in life. That's life has so much planned for us, and in the space of really overnight, even, or again with the click of one button, everything could change. And the way that I can prove to that is this following story, because with the click of one button, everything did change, and we had a miracle finding from it. So my great grandmother was liberated from the death march on the 13th of April, 1945, a day which is actually often referred to as an unlucky day, Friday the 13th of April, but for her it's a liberation day, and a day when she often refers to as really her being reborn. In a sense, she had her life before the Holocaust, she had her life during the Holocaust, and then she had her life after the Holocaust, and that began on that day of liberation. And whilst being liberated from the death march, an unnamed American Jewish liberator handed her a banknote, and he wrote on it 10 words of hope: the start to a new life, good luck and happiness. And this was the first piece of kindness that she received since the beginning of the war, really, or even since she had arrived in Auschwitz a year before that. And he didn't write his name, he only wrote his position in the army, assistant to Chaplain Schachter. But the problem is, there were numerous assistants to Chaplain Schachter. And after that day, my great-grandmother never saw this soldier again. And this obviously meant so much to her that she kept it for 75 years, hidden away in one of the back of her cupboards. And it was only during the COVID pandemic, when lockdown rules had eased slightly, that I went round to her house. And this was just after I'd written the Jewish News article. And I said to her, I want to write more articles about your story. So please show me some tangible things from the time of the Holocaust, or just after, or just before, that I can share with the world, whether it be on social media or through an article. And she said she has a think for a minute, and she rummages around the back of her cupboards, and she wasn't looking for the back of this banknote, but she pulls out an orange album, and we're flicking through, and in the midst of that, we see this banknote. And I look at it, and she tells me the story, and I'm blown away. I realize, wow, I've never heard this story, but also I've never really learned about the kindness of the liberators. And this is an incredible story. Why don't I try and find the soldier? So I remember telling her, I'm going to try find the soldier on social media. She laughed. I said, what? I'll be able to find him in 24 hours. And she said, you'll never be able to do that. I posted it on Twitter. I wrote a tweet. I clicked a blue button that said tweet. And within 2 hours, 2 million people had seen the tweet, and within 8 hours, we managed to find the unnamed soldier. And that really is a miracle find. 2 dots from opposite sides of the world. The family now lived in America. The soldier had passed away. But
in my state, New Jersey, I believe.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And we were able to find the family of Private Heyman Schulman, who helped liberate my great-grandmother, and he was that angel liberator. And that was the moment for me that everything changed, because I realized that if I just take my great-grandmother's story and post it on social media and use my skills of social media and writing to do that, hopefully we'll be able to make an impact and find more miracle finds. And since then, there's so much that we could talk about that's happened. And the message to every other young person or every other person in the world would be that no matter how young or old you are, whether you're 19, 99, any older or younger, or anywhere in between, you can make a positive impact in the world. You just have to find that thing. We all have this treasure chest with a banknote, not the exact banknote, but with a story or a memory that stays locked up until we turn towards it, unlock it, and share it with the world. And there's so much that we can learn from every single person's experience in the world. Every grandparent, every parent, every sibling has their own story, has something to share, has a message to share with the world. And if we take those messages and we share them in a positive way, you might think that no one's listening. And I say to everyone, it's nice to have 2 million followers on social media. It's great. But if only one person learns, if even you only have 10 followers and one of those followers is listening, then that's all you need. Then at least that one person is learning. At least you've made an impact on one person. And we've seen how much of an impact that can make just by COVID, if I give an example. Because with COVID-19, if one person had COVID, then they could pass that on to 10 people just by meeting others. And that's the same. Of course, that was a terrible thing, but that's the same with an important message.
Mm-hmm.
If you are just one person and you only share that to one person, that one person might share it to 2, those 2 people might share it to another 2, and it's an exponential rate of increase. And that's exactly the same with what happened with COVID across the world. And you look at how many people that affected, you can see how many people one positive message might affect in years to come. And that's why we must take these stories, we must take these memories, we must speak to others and learn about them, because you never know what you might learn. You never know the positive impact that you might have from their story.
It's so true. And I've learned that through hosting this show. I started this show at the beginning of the pandemic, really to cheer people up, and then created this series about anti-Semitism and using my voice. I don't have 2 million followers, but again, if one person is impacted, I agree. I've done something to help.
Yes.
Prior to starting this journey on social media and sharing Lily's story, talk about your experiences with anti-Semitism, and then because I am sure you have experienced anti-Semitism on social media since.
Unfortunately, there's an incredible amount of hate on social media. I actually don't like to focus on it, and you'll notice that throughout all of my interviews, almost on social media, off social media, on traditional news channels, and also in the book, we focus very little, if you notice, on the actual anti-Semitism and hatred that we receive, especially online, because that's exactly what they want. The people who are sending this hatred, they want you to focus on them. They want you to be impacted by it. They want to hurt you and to harm you. But my message to them is they will not succeed, because we look at the positives. We see the millions of comments that we've had of positive, of kindness from other people who are learning, who want to learn, who want to know more. And they'll never win. And it only emphasizes the need to do what we do, and to do it even more, and to do it more powerfully, and to combat their hatreds in kindness. And that's why I don't like to focus on them. But I will say that every single day I wake up to hundreds, if not thousands, of anti-Semitic DMs, comments. There was once a website that was created about me and my great-grandmother, which we managed to take down, targeting our story and saying it was all fake, and that there are countless other things which I could tell you. And in terms of offline, unfortunately, there is anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. I mean, I won't sit here and lie to you and say that it's terrible. It's nothing like the 1930s of Germany, and it's not, I don't even think, as bad as it is in America, but it is bad. And people are very happy to just say things on the street, or to people wearing kippot, or on the train, and they often go unchecked, and people don't stand up for others, and it's sad to see that people don't learn. But I think we're very supportive. We have a very supportive government and a royal family and press, on the whole. Of course, there are exceptions, but on the whole are supportive, and we have to appreciate that and thank them for that support. And of course, everything can change very quickly, but at the moment we do. I think I'll just say one story, which is in the book. But one time I was walking to school as a primary school pupil, so I was younger than 12 years old. I was walking with my older brother to school, and someone stopped beside us, rolled down their window and screamed, "You dirty Jew." And at such a young age, you don't realize why they're doing that. You don't realize why you're different, or even that you are different. And as you grow up, you do, and you realize why these sorts of things happen. But it's incredibly sad, and I mean, who wants their own children to have to go through something like that? So I can only hope that the situation gets better. But again, it only emphasizes the needs to do what we do and why we do it.
Well, absolutely. And I think I heard you say the importance of spreading this education, because half of teenagers in the UK and America don't know about the Holocaust.
Yes, it's an incredibly sad statistic, firstly, but even more so, it's worrying. And that's why I educate. I mean, the questions that we get from some, especially Americans, I will say, on TikTok is just ludicrous in a way. The questions such as, why did you pick Auschwitz? Why didn't you go somewhere else? They don't even realize that she didn't have a choice. But these people aren't being anti-Semitic. They're not trying to spread hatred. They simply don't know. And it's
uneducated.
If the schools aren't going to educate, if the states aren't going to put in provisions to ensure that the schools are going to educate, because in the UK we're lucky that it's embedded in the syllabus. They have to teach about the Holocaust, but even then there's so many loopholes and so many problems with the education. But at least they learn something. In America, there are so many states where they don't have to learn anything. But that's why it's up to people like me, and that's why I'll continue to use my platform as much as possible to educate, because as long as there is still only one person who doesn't know, we have to reach that one person.
Brilliant. This year you marched with 9,000 from Auschwitz I to Auschwitz-Birkenau. What did it mean for you to be there and see that firsthand where your great-grandmother was?
Yes, so I was invited by the International March of the Living, but I went with the UK delegation to attend the March of the Living this year, and firstly document it on our TikTok, and the videos from a 3-day trip had over 55 million views, which is unbelievable. And we were able to meet incredible survivors on that trip. The UK delegation, I think, had 5 or 7 Holocaust survivors, depending. I mean, some left and some came. And other delegations had incredible survivors too, and we were honoured to be able to meet them and have personal interviews with them, and we shared some of those on TikTok too. And I'm always so honoured to meet other survivors and be able to share their stories as well as my great grandmothers. And we were marching from Auschwitz I to Birkenau, and I thought to myself whilst we were marching with people with Israeli flags, people with Jewish symbols on, also people who weren't Jewish, but people with kippot, and people putting on tefillin. And I sat there, and you look around, and me and my mother just stood to the side for a minute. We just wanted to reflect. And you look and you realize how incredible this is. 9,000 people from across the world, mainly Jewish, but also non-Jewish people, coming together. That is the best statement. And again, it comes back to my great-grandmother's statement of the Nazis did not win. That is the way that we show the Nazis did not win. Marching through Auschwitz-Birkenau, through the gates of Auschwitz-Birkenau, and also through Auschwitz I, the gate of Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, walking through there together with Holocaust survivors with a kippah on as a proud Jewish person. I don't think there's any greater statement. And that really meant so much to me. And it was really special. It was a really special trip, which I learned so much on. It was only my second visit to Auschwitz-Birkenau and Auschwitz, and I think you have to go more than once to really learn. I mean, there are people who don't even go, but I think one thing which I would say to people, I would encourage people to go, because when you go there and you see the vastness and you see the scale of it, especially in Auschwitz, I mean, it does feel a bit like a museum, but it is sort of a museum now. But nonetheless, when you go there and you realize how big it is, and you see the scale, you see Auschwitz-Birkenau, or even Auschwitz and gas chamber 1, which is still standing, that's when you can, again, start to understand. Or when you see the pile of shoes, when you see the pile of hair. And again, it goes back to the message that I was saying at the beginning, which is that you can never understand. 6 million is an impossible number to understand. You can't comprehend it. You can't understand why humans would have wanted to inflict that pain and evil onto other humans. But despite that, going there, you can begin to gain a small understanding of what happened. So I would encourage anyone listening to go.
I have not been, and I would, I lost my grandfather and my aunt and many cousins, but my immediate family, I would very much like to take that trip. You recently also traveled to Hungary to pick up a Bible that belonged to a 13-year-old boy murdered at Auschwitz 79 years ago. Please tell us this story, because again, the power of those clicks that you keep making.
So my great-grandmother's youngest brother, Bela Engelmann, was murdered on the 9th of July, 1944 in the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau. He has no grave, there's no birth certificate, there's no death certificate, and we've never even found a photograph of him. There's nothing which links my great-grandmother, other than her memory, to her youngest brother, Bela Engelmann, who was murdered aged 13, for no reason other than the fact that he was born Jewish. And recently, someone got in touch with me on social media, and again, this comes back to the power of social media, and said to me that they had watched a clip of us on Hungarian TV, and their father is an antique book dealer who has a box of books, Jewish books, from my great-grandmother's town from before the Holocaust. And I thought to myself, wow, he might possibly have videos from my great-grandmother's family. And a few days later, he got back in touch, and he said, having read the book, I realized your book, Lily's Promise in Hungarian, I realized that we have a book from your great-grandmother's youngest brother. And he sends us a photo, and I could not believe it. And my great-grandmother couldn't believe it. My great-grandmother's sister, who is still alive in Israel, we showed her. She also couldn't believe it. And this was his school book, a Jewish Bible, one of the 5 books of Exodus, Shemot, one of the 5 books of Moses, the book of Shemot, Exodus. And it was his school book. It's got his name in, it's got his doodles inside, it's got a stamp of his too. And that moment meant so much because, as I say, there's no tangible link to his existence other than this book now. There was no photo, no grave, no photo, no birth certificate, no death certificate. So for us to hold this book, it's that connection to that history. The last memory my great-grandmother has to him is not even saying goodbye, but just being separated from him on the ramp of Auschwitz-Birkenau when they arrived. He was sent by Dr. Mengele straight to the gas chambers. So to hand her that book while she was still in hospital and seeing the tears roll down her face, which you will have seen in a video on social media, that meant so much to me. And it really is so important, these tangible pieces of evidence of people's existence, and a person who we previously had no trace really of his existence before. That is so special, and that's so important. And these material evidence
80 years later.
Yeah, 80 years later. I mean, the Nazis not only tried to destroy all Jewish life, they wanted to destroy all traces of Jewish life. That included burning the synagogues, destroying the synagogues, burning the books, burning birth certificates, photos, all of that sort of thing. And so the fact that the book even survived all of that and then survived 80 years hidden in someone's cupboard in a box, that's incredible.
I said it backstage. I hope I can connect you from numbers to names to find some photographs, because
yes, it would be amazing. Thank you.
It is incredible. Are you currently working for the House of Commons in Parliament?
Yes, I am. So I have recently, in the past 3 months, began working for a cabinet minister. I won't say which one, but working for a cabinet minister in Parliament as his parliamentary researcher. So that includes researching and writing speeches and articles and advising. But actually, I'm quite proud to be a religious Jewish person working in Parliament, working for a cabinet minister. I think it's quite unique, quite rare, but also it puts you in a position where, were something to happen, you could possibly make a difference. You could have a voice and try and stand up for the Jewish community, but for all others too.
It is incredible what you have been doing. You will turn 20 yourself this December. How would you describe who Dov Forman is today?
It's a very good question, one which I think is very hard to answer, and one which maybe I haven't put enough thought into. I would say Dov Forman is a person who, well, I'll talk about myself in the first person. I think I'm someone who's incredibly intrigued into everyone. I always want to learn more about other people and their history and their stories. I think, again, as I was saying earlier, there's so much we can learn from every other person. I'd love to meet new people and try and connect at least with one new person every single day. I try to go into as many workplaces as possible, meet as many world leaders and important people, celebrities, but also regular people too, because everyone is of value. I would say that I'm also someone who tries in every way possible to be creative in the way that I share stories and in the way that I do everything. But I'm also someone who's proactive. I think it's so easy to say stuff in life, but when we say things, we have to go through with it and try and find a way to go through with it too. So, I mean, again, I could go on and tell you more about myself. So someone who's religious and who values religion, but also people, I mean, I'm respectful of everyone, whether they are of a different religion or of no religion at all too. And I think that's incredibly important. And I think there are more people who need to learn that in the world.
I was just going to say that is a huge lesson people need to follow 100%. What do you do for fun?
So many people ask me this, and I work a lot, whether it be in the House of Parliament, and then I do all the creative stuff in terms of TikTok, and then I have to also write and all of these things too. So it takes up a lot of my time, but I love it. I enjoy it, and I don't see it as a burden. I see it as a responsibility, but one which I'm proud to carry. I have a lot of friends, so I see my friends in my spare time, and that's what I do for fun. And I spend a lot of time with family too. Yeah,
that's great. And like I said, this December, Safta, your great grandmother will turn 100. Are there big plans ahead?
We are in the process of planning a few things, and I'm sure you'll see them soon on social media.
That's awesome. Dov, before I leave you today, you are always welcome here in the United States. And if I can help you in the work you're doing, please reach out. You are truly changing the world with your work and by sharing your great grandmother's story.
Thank you very much. It really means a lot. And I'll certainly be in touch if I'm ever in the US.
Please do. I'm outside of New York City, right in New Jersey. Stay here for just a minute as I sign off. And thank you, Dov. Truly, you are truly changing the world.
Thank you very much. An honor to be with you. And if anyone ever wants to be in touch, I'm very easily accessible on social media. Just send me a DM.
All of Dov's links are down below right here on YouTube. Thanks again, Dov. I am eternally grateful to Dov Forman for joining us tonight and sharing Lily's story with the world. I encourage you, if you have not done so yet, to pick up a copy of Lily's Promise, where all books are sold. As I leave you tonight, remember, we all have choices to make in life. Speak up, do the hard things, and let's all fight to stop hate in all its forms. I truly believe conversations like this can change the world. Please stay tuned for the next conversation.